Welcome into the final bet. The NFL schedule was released on Wednesday. We'll do a deep dive into that. Also, the Pels flopped in the NBA draft lottery. We'll delve into that also. Joining us on the show this week, Scott Kushner of the Poke and Kush podcast. Another tough week for the Pels and the Saints with the lottery and no primetime games.
I'm cool with no primetime games.
Okay.
I like no night games. I think the daytime NFL football is where we should be. Then you get to be home for the night games.
Okay.
That's where it's at. I like that. And you know, you're not having to deal with driving back at 11 o'clock at night and everybody's had 400 beers. I think we're in a good spot. I like a little daytime football. Also good when you have a 6-year-old to bring into the games.
Okay,
Much
yep. So you're right. Yeah, the Thursday night game, which was a new thing for me. I didn't even know that you couldn't play on Thursday night. I thought everybody played on Thursday night. So I learned something new. Thank you, New Orleans Saints. All right, let's get to the opening line. New Orleans underdogs in almost every game, rebuilding the black and gold, and Pels lottery loss. First off, though, Scott, let's start with 17 games on the Saints schedule and not on prime time. Are you surprised by this development?
No. And even if Derek Carr was still on the team, no. The primetime games they've had the last few years have been so abysmally, brutally bad. And it's not as if every NFL game that's on television is good, but the Green Bay game last year where they get shut out, the Denver game here for Sean Payton's return, the Kansas City game, like they're jokes. Like the Saints are not competitive in them. And the only time the Saints really have played well is these random noon games. They started 2-0 last year. And that was like, oh, maybe the Saints might be something. And then the minute they get on a national stage, they've fallen apart. So I don't think it's because of the time, but I totally understand why if you are a network executive and you paid billions of dollars for these games, that you do not say, we want to cut out our 3-hour time slot and give our network over to the New Orleans Saints and Tyler Shough and maybe Spencer Rattler and Kellen Moore. Like, it just doesn't move the needle whatsoever. And now that there's no requirement, which I think you might be right, this might be the first time there's no requirement in a long time. But yeah, so 3 teams got left off entirely. The Saints are among that pack of being among the most irrelevant franchises in the league, and for very, very good reason.
And the biggest shocker, I didn't realize it's been since 2000. 25 years. This is unprecedented because you got to remember that 2000 team, it was Jim Haslett's first year after a Mike Ditka disaster. So I understand why they weren't on prime time in the year 2000. But after that, they started trending upward. But this is like historically bad for the New Orleans Saints to go 25 years without prime time.
Yeah, when you think about it, 2000, they had nothing, and they ended up having a really good season. So they earned themselves a primetime game in 2001. Then they had some players enough to get one in 2002. Then it was sort of a stretch to get one. I remember they got killed in 2003 by the Colts. I don't know if you remember Peyton came in here.
Oh, yes.
And scored like 100 points
Good
in the first
memory.
quarter. It was like, so I think if you actually would have gotten to 2006 without having played one, like had not been for Katrina, they probably wouldn't have gotten one then. And now you're back in that situation. But it's like that was a Katrina homecoming thing. That was almost a gift of a primetime game for New Orleans, for the city coming back. And this feels like, what is the storyline for New Orleans? If you are a regular NFL, I watch the NFL because it's on person, what are the Saints bringing to you? A quarterback you've never heard of, and a coach you've never heard of, and a team that is not going to really compete. And I guess there is still an opportunity to flex. That didn't exist in prior years.
Okay, yeah, so we could still get a prime time.
If they are good, which seems highly unlikely, but if they are good, that does exist now. There's a lot more options to flex them into different spots. I was surprised how many games were at 3 o'clock, though. That was unique. I feel like maybe they're balancing that out between the noon.
Yeah, the noon and 3. Yeah, give them more 3 o'clock window games. All right, of the 17 games on the schedule this year, they're only favored in one contest, and that's the Jets at home. That seems a little extreme considering their over-under win total is 5.5 games.
Yeah, well, I guess that's like the toss-up nature of the NFL, right? Where when you look at each individual game on the schedule, you only see one win. But through how likely games just get thrown around in the last minutes, that through osmosis, they're basically going to win 5 or 6. I think they're very bad. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. When you don't have a quarterback that has ever played, I don't know how you can predict them to be much of anything. And that's what they're going to have. They have extremely thin at wide receiver and at running back, which is what they've been the last few years. And those years end up with injuries. And then you end up playing guys who are terrible. And you got nothing. And you got very old on defense. They've tried to rebuild that a little bit. But there's not a lot you can point to in this team and say it's reliable. Like,
No.
Who's reliable on the Saints? Alvin Kamara. That might be it. Like, who else is there? And even he wasn't that great because the offensive line was so bad. So it's hard to ever remember a team in the last 25 years where you looked at the roster and said, well, I don't think there's like one other guy that you can really lean on to do anything.
Yeah. The one thing I will push back on is that they're underdogs at home to the Giants and the Panthers. So the Giants finished 3-14 last year. They have Russell Wilson at quarterback. The Panthers are 5-12 last year, and they still have Bryce Young at quarterback. Now, I understand being underdogs on the road at Carolina, but for them to come in here and for the Giants and the Panthers to be favorites, I think that's a little absurd.
Look, Russell Wilson's won a lot of games.
Yeah.
And he won a lot of games last year in Pittsburgh. They weren't great, but he did win games. Tyler Shough has never gotten a yard in the NFL, and he wasn't a first-round pick. Like, if you're talking like the Titans are the number one pick, they're at least Cam Ward is something. This is it's dire of a situation from the outside as you can imagine. It doesn't mean it's impossible for them to be good. Rashid Shaheed's talented, Chris Olave's talented, Juwan Johnson's talented. They got guys you've heard of and names and whatever, but how can you think they're going to beat anybody, quite frankly? When you look at a matchup of 11 on 11 on each side, you go, who are they better than? I mean, Carolina won games last year at the end of the season with Bryce Young. That would make him better than Tyler Shough is right now, right? Or better than Spencer Rattler, who was terrible at the end of when he played, and not necessarily all his fault, but they were a very, very bad offense when he was running the show. So it's like, how can you, if you're putting a gambling line, how can you possibly think a team is worse than them? I guess that's where I'm at.
Okay, all right. This is a big moment right here, Scott. Do you remember where you were this past Saturday when you got the news of Derek Carr's retiring? I was running on the streetcar line and my phone exploded with like breaking news alerts. I feel like this was a big moment for the city where everybody was like, I remember where I was at. Do you remember when you got the call, when you get on a text? How was it?
I got several texts as I was taking care. When you're watching kids and they're going in different directions in your house.
Yeah.
You're like, well, which one seems the most dangerous right now?
Yeah,
Who do I need to be on top of? And then as that's happening, my phone is buzzing, and I look at it. I was like, all right, well, you guys just do whatever you need to do. You're all three of you in danger now. No, it was like hilarious, rooting of joy from all these people. And it was like, they don't have a quarterback they want necessarily, especially at the time. It was like, nobody knew who the heck was going to play quarterback, but they did know that they didn't want it to be Derek Carr. And so will the Saints be worse this year? Almost certainly. I think if Derek Carr was a quarterback, they would be better this season. Would that team have been a playoff team, though, with Carr? Probably not.
Yeah.
And so what have you really lost other than the opportunity to reset, and really a huge opportunity to reset next offseason when you have a lot of money and for the first time some real flexibility to do some stuff with it?
Yeah, you talked about it. So their over-under win total was 6.5 before Carr retired. Now it's down to 5.5. So 1 game difference between Carr and who's going to be the quarterback, and that brings us to our next topic. Now they have Tyler Shough. Should they just make him the starter from day one and just roll with it? New coach, new system, just roll with the new quarterback?
Yeah, I think you have to. Based on where you took him in the draft, if you had taken him in the 4th round, or even the 3rd round, maybe you could get away with not playing him and playing Spencer Rattler, at least to start the season. But if you're going to take a guy at 40, I don't know how you don't play him and instead play a guy who has not won anything and who you took in the 5th round last year. So unless he has a horrible camp or something goes catastrophically wrong, I just don't see a way in which they do not start him. And you're going to have to give him an opportunity because more than likely, based on what you're saying about the odds of each of these games, they're going to be picking at the top of next year's draft, and you got to know what you have at quarterback if you're going to make a decision there. If this guy is good enough and you think he can improve, then maybe you don't have to take a quarterback in the top 5 next year. And if the other side comes true and he's terrible and the team is terrible, then yeah, you can hit the reset button very quickly and go get a Nussmeier, Manning, somebody of that nature.
Ah, okay. So Saints under win total is 5.5 games, but they're only favored in one, as we talked about. Something doesn't add up on these numbers. Now, I will say this. You can go to different FanDuel Sportsbook. You can drop it down to 3.5 and over-under win total. Yeah, 4.5. You can go all the way up to 7.5 and bet those totals. Do you think 5.5 is a fair number? I guess the main goal of these betting sites is to get money on both sides. So I understand what they're doing. But 5.5, maybe that seems a little high right now, huh?
It does. I last year, several people that I knew, including myself, dropped the line. I think it was 8.5, and I dropped it to 6.5. It was like plus 300 or something, and that hit pretty easily. I felt pretty good about it. You know? 2-0 start made it a little rocky, but they were not a very deep team, and they got totally exposed once a few injuries came in, and that's what probably is going to happen this time around. And 5.5, I think, is about as low as you can put an NFL team now, just because there is so much uncertainty about every single roster. There are still professional players out there, and you do have guys who have skins on the wall. Eric McCoy's got skins on the wall. We talked about Kamara and Olave and Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and Tyrann Mathieu. Like, these are not a bunch of like ragtag rookies you're just throwing out on the field. It's not like when the Sixers were tanking.
No,
Or you saw what the Utah Jazz did this year. It's not that level. They are trying to win games. They have players who are professional. So if you catch a team napping on the right day, you're going to beat them. And even though you probably shouldn't beat them, you're going to win some games. And so I could see the Saints winning 6 games. Do I think it's more likely than not? No, I would bet the under on that. But I get why they can't put the line much lower than that.
So they've gone under on the over and the win total 4 years in a row now. So
they keep dropping it. Every year it's gone down, and they keep dropping it.
It was at 9.5 once. It's been 8.5. It's been at 7.5. So it just keeps going to 5.5.
And the amount bet always is like 70-80% on the over.
Yeah.
Vegas just cleans up on the Saints.
Maybe they'll learn their lesson this time around. All right, coming up, we got more with Scott. We're going to go from the Saints to the Pels. Yes, more pain on the way. The Pels can't get a win on the court or off. They dropped to 7 in the NBA draft lottery. Scott, the hits just keep on coming for this franchise.
It's tough. When you can't win ping pong balls, you've really hit the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
I mean, at least even when times were the bleakest under Dell Demps, they did hit the lottery a couple times, you know. It's rough. It was a worst case scenario, but it is also what the NBA has been trying to do, which is disincentivize tanking. This team absolutely tanked toward the very, very end of the year. Not the whole second half of the year, but the very end of the year. They were for sure trying to lose games. It doesn't do you as much good as it used to. Like, the odds are flattened, and to get a top 4 pick is just not nearly as likely, even if you finish with a bottom 4 record. And so, I mean, it was crazy, but it also was not as shocking as it would have been at a different time.
I think the only shocking part was I didn't think the Pelicans missing out was shocking. I think that was the Mavericks getting the number 1 pick with a 1.8% chance, kind of bailing them out. So speaking of the lottery also, Zion was the representative for the New Orleans Pelicans at the lottery. Does this mean that he's coming back next year, or is this reading way too into the weeds there that he was at the draft lottery, that he's going to be back on the team this upcoming season?
I think, who else would you put up there? I mean, maybe Willie? Who else is Dumars was in the back room. So Joe Dumars has just recently taken over. He was in the back for the actual drawing. And then who else are you going to put up there? I mean, if Zion's going to be in Chicago and willing to go, he's still with the team. He's a cornerstone of the franchise. I'm certain Joe Dumars would rather have him bought in than not. And when they make a decision, if they make a decision about a trade, I mean, that comes later. But if they are going to be successful, definitely in the short term, they have to have Zion on board. This is a nice gesture of goodwill, if absolutely nothing else, to have him there. And the fact that he wanted to do it, and the fact he was willing to kind of sit there and do it, I think is a positive for where the Pelicans are right now.
So you say, we're reading in the lottery, but you personally, do you think that the right move is to give Zion 1 more year with the Pelicans, or at least a half a season to get it right?
It depends who else you have. It depends what else July looks like. If they start making a bunch of moves and try to kind of downgrade the roster, then I don't understand why you keep Zion. But if you were trying to upgrade the roster and you're going to try to get better immediately and more competitive than they were at the start of last season, then yeah, you need Zion there to do it. And you're not going to get fair value in the 30 games Zion plays. He's great. And like, you're never going to get that value from anybody by trading him because no one believes in Zion in the league because he does not play enough games. So maybe if he comes out strong, plays really well, if the team's struggling, then you can trade him. But for right now, it just doesn't feel like there's a good point unless he's not bought in. If he's not bought in, Joe Dumars doesn't believe in him, then absolutely it's time to move on. But for right now, that's not the indication that it appears they're sending.
Yeah. Also reading into things, we went from the lottery. Let's talk about the Saints draft war room. Willie Green was in the war room for the NFL draft. So are we to believe that he's going to ride out his final year of his deal, that he's still around the organization right now? I know the playoffs aren't over with, so they could go out, but it's got to be good for Willie that he's still around the team.
Yeah, I mean, there's been no indication they're moving on, right? Like, there doesn't seem to be anything that's, Joe Dumars spoke highly of him in his press conference, mentioned his high school, mentioned that he wanted to talk to him while he was there. Like, it doesn't feel like that is a frosty relationship that he's walking into. It feels very, very similar to the situation that David Griffin walked into with Alvin Gentry. They had a previous relationship. They liked each other. Even though he was a failing coach, he kept him for another year. It ended up being a terrible decision. They probably should have moved on sooner, but I'm not surprised this is where we're at. I don't agree with it, but I'm not surprised that this is where we're at, and that I do think he's going to be the coach. Unless something drastic happens, they get an opportunity to hire somebody they didn't think they were going to be able to. But at this stage, he's well-liked by the upper management in the Pelicans, and he's well-liked by Joe Dumars. It feels very hard to believe they're just going to turn the switch and get rid of him.
Okay. Finally, is this team a playoff contender? Now, let's preface this by 20 teams, if you count the play-in, 20 teams have a shot at the playoffs. I mean, I know we like to say that the Saints were snake bitten, and that's the reason why they didn't make the playoffs because so many injuries. We could say the same about the Pelicans, but I feel like the Pelicans have a better shot of turning this thing around if they just got some injury issues worked out, especially with Zion.
Yeah, if they get DeJounte Murray back sooner than they hoped, Zion plays 90% of the games, which has that ever happened? I don't think so.
He had 65 the year before last, and then got hurt in the playing game.
So he played 80% of the games, 70%, but not 90. He needs to play a lot of games, and they crank up some wins early in the year. They get Murray back. They stay healthy. Yeah, they can be a play-in team, I suppose, but it's like that feels with this group where they're at now. Now, there's still a whole July to go where there's going to be a lot of moves and a draft pick, and they've got a good roster. They just don't have a top 1-2 like most really good teams have. Zion has been unreliable, and Brandon Ingram is gone, and they really haven't fully replaced that spot yet. And so how do you do that, and can you cobble together a trade to get someone? The biggest aspiration would be Giannis, right?
Right.
Try to get Giannis. I don't think they probably get to that level, but maybe there is a player who's on a contender. John Morant, I think, that name has floated around some. There are guys who are out there in situations where teams are ready to move on from them, who are still great players, who can help right now. So to say whether or not they're a playoff team now, I think is premature, but I do think they are better positioned than the Saints, certainly. Not only because of the amount of teams that make the playoffs, but also I just think they're more talented.
So you tell me there's a chance. All right. Poke and Kush podcast. New episode came out today, correct?
We recorded, yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going to be some Derek Carr in there and
There's
some Pelicans
a lot
in there.
Of that. You're going to hear a lot of that.
All right. So Poke and Kush podcast, you can find it on all the streaming platforms. Scott, thanks again for your time, sir.
Thank you, God.